We are about to begin another episode of the Prosperident webinar series. From their unique perspective as dentistry's embezzlement experts, Prosperident's team brings you information you will not find anywhere else. Now sit back and relax while Prosperident's Amber Weber, Wendy Askins, and David Harris address the issues that are important to you.
Hello, everybody. We're starting another webinar tonight, and this one's going to be great. The title is certainly attention-grabbing. It says, "What happens in Vegas ends in prison," and we'll discuss why we picked that title in a little bit. I wanted to mention a few things before we begin. First of all, my two usual colleagues aren't here with me tonight. Amber Weber is speaking at the California Dental Association, and knock 'em dead, Amber. Wendy Askins had a death in the family, so she's off tonight. Instead, we have with us somebody who normally is behind the scenes, but came on camera for us tonight, Sheila O'Driscoll. And we also have a couple of guests who I'll introduce in just a minute. Just a few things about tonight. We're going to go till about 15 minutes past the next hour. We will have some time for questions at the end, so please feel free to use it. And we're running both questions and answers and chat. If there's something that you want us to address, the Q&A button on your screen is the one you use for that. And chat is a way to just share your thoughts or give feedback or encouragement. And as always, we are recording this session. If you have to leave early, you can check it out later. It'll be available on our website by Tuesday, and Sheila normally sends out a post communication after where she'll give you the link of where to find that, but we will have it available in perpetuity. And I also want to mention that if you're with us live, you can enjoy continuing education credit through PACE, and that's thanks to our friends at Altura Periodontics in Colorado. The other thing I want to mention is we have a wonderful guest next month, and you really don't want to miss this. June 22nd at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. We're going to have a very dear friend of mine, Deborah Engelhardt-Nash. She is a practice management consultant of incredible stature, and going to be a great presentation. I cannot wait to have the other Deborah with us. But speaking of Deborah, I want to introduce a couple of special guests. The first one you may have seen before. He's Scott Clifford. Scott is what's called a supervising examiner, and that is the highest level of examiner that Prosperident has. Scott is an unbelievable investigator. He handles some of our toughest cases. His insight, and you're going to get to see it tonight, is just breathtaking. And our other very special guest is Dr. Deborah Staten. She's there on the screen. She is a dentist in Las Vegas, and she was the victim in the embezzlement that we're going to tell you about tonight. A couple of things about Deborah. You see her there in uniform, so you know what her part-time job is. She is Dr. Deborah Staten. She is also Major Deborah Staten in the United States Army Reserve. She got into dentistry a little bit later in life. She started as a dental assistant and eventually did her GED, went back to college, went to dental school, and became a dentist. So she's covered a lot of positions in a dental practice, and you'll see some of that experience coming through. She and I have something in common, and you see her in uniform there. This is me in the 1980s, and I'll say a few things. First of all, these glasses were really good at birth control. Yeah, they kept people away like you wouldn't believe. I spent my time in a green suit as well. So Deborah, at this point, I'll thank you for your service. And there's one more actor in this trilogy who's not with us tonight. Her name is Danielle Powers, and the reason Danielle is not with us is she's currently in prison. And how she got there is really what we're going to talk about tonight. So what we're going to do tonight is play a little bit of recorded video that Scott and Deborah have done in advance. And we've got several slides where Sheila interviewed them and got their comments on various things, just to give this a little bit of structure. So we're going to play a video clip, and then after that, we'll probably talk about it a little bit, and then we'll go to the next one. Again, if you have questions, use that Q&A box, and we'd love to hear them. So let's start by finding out about the relationship that Deborah and Danielle Powers, the embezzler, had.
Danielle and I had met in an office prior to her working for me. And I just thought she was amazing. She was really good at selling treatment. And I felt like it was a match made in heaven. So I had offered her to come to my practice when I opened it, and she accepted. And of course, we were a startup practice. So as we grew, it was just wonderful. And we grew easily. And it was, I contributed that to her as well as to my husband, John, working in the practice, because we had a very dynamic, friendly environment where patients felt comfortable and warm, and it was easy for us to become more and more successful. Although over time, I felt like it should have been better. And so over time, Danielle and I's relationship started to weather because of the office, we were incredible friends too. We went to the gym together. We went on vacations together. She would take care of my son when I was out of town. She would take care of my dog if we left on family vacation. So I trusted her wholeheartedly with everything. Conversation wise, I would communicate and confide in her. And literally, she was my go-to person at the office that I would figure things out with. And so the bond was really, really there. And she was very interested and very supportive of me as a friend and as her employer. But now in hindsight, that's very obvious on why. And it's because so that she could be in the know of everything, so she could continue to manipulate every situation that was happening.
So manipulation, and Scott, you've seen lots of embezzlement. How typical or atypical is Deborah's story about the relationship between embezzler and embezzled?
It's pretty typical. And that's, I think, what really gets to the betrayal part of embezzlement is that a thief really doesn't generally want to be abrasive, because they want to keep their job if they found a good mode to steal. And so for that reason, they, for the most part, try to maintain a friendly and close working relationship.
Absolutely. So moving from there, the next question is, well, how did Deborah get suspicious? And let's let her tell that story.
The investigation started in 2019, but we were a little suspicious that something was happening for at least a year prior to that. Although my husband and I felt rather green at what we were doing, and we were happy with the success that was happening. Although what we kept saying to each other was, well, if she's stealing, it can't be much because we're doing okay. And I think that was more out of scarcity, because we didn't know, we weren't convinced we could do it ourselves without her. And so we just felt like we couldn't do better without her. So we're just going to tolerate this.
Yeah, Deborah, as you've thought about this more after that interview, is there anything you want to add? A lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's so many wonderful, great people in this industry. For us, I think it was literally just the scarcity and not being willing to trust anybody at that point, even ourselves, because that's really what it went back to. We're so capable now. I mean, and now that I've doubled the size of my team since then, doubled the size of my practice, and I have an amazing team since then. And so in hindsight, I kept baby in a corner. I did it all by myself. I kept myself in my own corner instead of knowing that I could trust other people, and there's good people that can help do this business. I mean, it does take a village. We can't do it alone. So yeah, but I just didn't have to trust that one.
You know, you raise a really good point, and it's something I emphasize when I do speaking to live audiences. I say, you know, let's remember that it's a really small proportion of dental employees who cause all this trouble. And the overwhelming majority of people who work in dental practices are terrific people who are there for all the right reasons. And it's just the very odd rotten apple that causes the problem. And, you know, I'm so glad to hear that you're happy with your team and you've got it the way you want it. So Deborah called us, she called me, we started gathering information, and we put ace investigator Scott Clifford on the case. And Scott got into it, and he formed some impressions very quickly of what might be happening. And let's hear what he told us.
I've been doing this for a while, so I know some things to look at, some of the high points first. And within the first few reports that I pulled, I really got the sense that there was something egregiously wrong with the data and what I was seeing. There were some pretty clear markers in there for me, from my eye, not to everybody's, but to my eye. When I started looking at that case, I was like, yeah, this is going to be significant.
Scott, anything you want to add now?
No, not really. It really struck me from the very beginning. You know, when we first start a case, we start by pulling a bunch of reports. That's what we do, and then determine from there what's going on. And as you pull them, you look at your screen, and you can see certain things that I, you know, obviously can't really go into in this forum. But some of the first things that I saw were not satisfactory. There was something very wrong, and I knew it right away.
Scott's kind of like a bloodhound. I mean, his nose, his instinct is always first class, and so he said he was seeing it right away. So the next thing that happens in a case is the investigator goes back to the client and says, "Yeah, this is embezzlement, and it might be significant." And of course, then the client reacts to that. And let's hear what Deborah said about how she felt next.
When Scott first told us that embezzlement was in fact happening, we weren't surprised at the fact that it was happening, because we knew that, and that's why we were having conversations with Scott. But what we were shocked by was the amount of embezzlement that was happening, and the way that it was happening. And so hurt, I was incredibly hurt because of the relationship that we had built with her over the years, because she was more than just an office employee to me. And so to know that the amount of embezzlement that had been going on, and for the time period that it was going on, was just, that's what crushed me. It wasn't so much shock, it was just the fact that the betrayal that had happened.
Yeah, we hear that a lot from people, you know. And Deborah, a comment I get a lot from a dentist when they see what's really happened is, you know, I was at her daughter's wedding 3 months ago, and of course now it's just starting to dawn on me how much of that wedding I really paid for. You know, we in fact, I was talking with a new client today, and you know, the staff member's daughter's wedding actually came up in that conversation. So there's betrayal, there's a lot of things. One thing we didn't talk about is the actual amount of money that was stolen, and I think that's a public matter now, isn't it? We can give a ballpark there.
It was almost identical to what I owed in student loans, which was like 265,000 or something.
Okay.
$256,000. $256,000.
That's kind of an interesting comparison, isn't it? You know, that she stole the amount that, you know, the amount I was still paying off for my education. Yeah, so a lot of money. And over what period of time did this happen? How long was she stealing?
I believe our records She was employed with me for 4 years and she was, no, 5 years, and she was stealing 4 of them.
So, you know, there's a definite cynicism in these people. Because, you know, on the one hand, they're smiling and nodding and, you know, trying to present like the ideal office manager. And on the other hand, their hand is in your pocket. So I totally get why that's hurtful. Now, Scott Clifford has been with us for around 10 years. He has found millions of dollars of embezzlement in his distinguished career here, and he knows a lot about thieves. And let's hear a bit of that.
Their first thought is to not get caught. And their second thought is to keep stealing. They really want to be able to continue, because it's not like a burglar where you can just, you know, go to a different house if one of them's locked. So they really have to keep their job. And so in order to do so, a lot of times some things in the office are run really well. And that includes interpersonal relationships. And so a lot of times you'll see a thief be very friendly, very easygoing, great with the patients. You know, a lot of things are really good about that person because they don't want to upset the cart that brings them the money. And so that, for that reason, it's just not that uncommon. I think my longest tenured thief that I ever caught was 35-year employee for a dental office. So yeah, not uncommon at all. You don't want to be angry and upset and drama filled, and although we do find some of those in thieves, but a lot of times you find some very, very nice people with good relationships that are the thief.
Scott, you made such a good point there, and this is I think really important to understanding thieves. Embezzlement is a lot more like a dripping tap than a busted pipe. You know, the amounts that are stolen each month are relatively small, and you know, it's just that over time, if somebody's taking $2,000 or $3,000 a month, over time it can add up to be a massive amount of money. But it tends to be really small, and that helps it fly under the radar. It's also a repeated act. I mean, this is the one of the big differences between embezzlement and most other crimes is most other crimes are committed once. Embezzlement is repeatedly victimizing the same person over and over.
And the amounts do tend to ramp up. They usually start small and then get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's not that they're getting bolder and bolder, it's that they're realizing that they're not getting caught.
Yeah. Yeah, they kind of find the under the radar threshold that they can go to. If anybody's wondering the ultimate outcome, you can see it over Scott's shoulder. Danielle was sentenced to 8 years in prison, so the dental profession will be safe from her for a while. But you know, it wasn't exactly a linear path from Deborah's office to prison, as we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, you know, it's not like thieves take $50,000 in a month. You know, as Scott says, it can start very small. They kind of work their way up to the point where they think they're taking as much per month as they can without being noticed, and then they just plateau there. Then there's the question, how did it happen? Well, there were some really interesting comments from both Scott and Deborah on methodology that we'll share with you.
We were running a software in our office that literally had, she had found the loophole in the software to be able to do what she was doing and keep us in the dark. And that was one thing that Scott found, the way she was manipulating the computers. And literally Scott got on the phone with the maker of that software, and this whole thing ended up changing a security parameter within that software, and they sent out an update so that what she did is no longer able to be done on that software. Remember that, Scott?
And it's not a small software either. And no, I wasn't aware that they actually implemented the change. This is news to me today. Well, the interesting part about that particular case is, yes, you are in Las Vegas, and yes, you do take in a lot of cash by virtue of the demographic. And it's not all just gambling. It's, you know, very tip oriented, service oriented business culture there. And But even though she was stealing virtually all of the cash, that wasn't enough for her. So we found evidence that she was actually eliciting the patient base to bring in more cash and then giving them discounts if they did. So not only she couldn't just steal the already plentiful cash, she had to steal more. But in order to do that, she had to convince people to bring it in. In order to do that, she traded away even more of Dr. Satan's money.
I'll make a couple of observations here. First of all, what Scott just said is so true. If I work at your front desk and I want to change the way that people pay, I can make that happen by simply floating some discounts that the doctor's not aware of. The second thing is, this case is, in my mind, a little unusual compared to what we see most of the time now. I mean, there was a time when the only thing that thieves stole was cash in a dental practice. And 20 or 25 years ago, it was very hard for somebody to cash a check that had somebody else's name on it. And their credit card payments and things like that were a lot tougher to adulterate than they are now. One thing that we see now, and I expect I'll get an affirmative nod from Scott on this one, is we see a lot of theft of checks and people finding a way to get their fingers into credit card payments as well. So there are, we when we're thinking about how to protect ourselves against embezzlement, we've got to expand our thinking beyond just cash. Scott, any thoughts?
Credit card theft and manipulations of credit card. People think of safe payment types. And I go through the list of payment types that people think are safe, and I have a case where I can show that they are not. And the thieves have become very creative, especially when some offices don't take cash. Okay, well, I still have to steal, and they'll figure out a way. There is no safe payment type.
Yeah, that's chilling, but 100% accurate. Thieves can find a way to attack any kind of payment type, even electronic funds transfers. And Scott, I think it was a case you had a couple of years ago where somebody had successfully redirected EFTs. And the interesting thing there was, even after they were fired by the practice, money was still going to the thief. It was like this gift that kept on giving.
Yeah, cutting them off from the practice did not cut them off from the electronic funds transfers that were still pouring in.
Yeah, it took, I forget the number of months, but I'm thinking it was around 6 months until the office realized that there was money still going into the thief's account, after they were long gone. One thing I'll mention for the audience where my thinking has changed in the past year. I always thought that electronic funds transfers were a pretty good way for a practice to receive money. We actually don't recommend payment by electronic funds transfers anymore. I'm much happier seeing checks come into your practice. And if you want to read up on why I think that, there's a post on our website where I outline my reasons. But I think the electronic funds transfers, first of all, pose some accounting challenges for the practice, and secondly, as I say, they're not the safe haven that probably most people actually think they are. So some good reading there. The other one, of course, that is a really bad idea in terms of how your practice can get paid is what's called a VCC, or a virtual credit card. So that's where insurance companies send to the practice. Usually it comes on the EOB. They give you a 16-digit credit card number, and conceptually it's like a prepaid Visa. And the way you get paid is you enter that Visa number into your merchant terminal. And there's a lot of stuff that goes wrong with these. And we recommend that if your practice is getting paid that way, to quote a former first lady, just say no. Deborah, have you seen these things, or did you ever accept those in your practice, virtual credit cards?
Yes, I was just asking John about that. We've almost eliminated all EFTs. We got up on board with them, and then we've now we're desperately trying to get rid of all of them.
Concealment. And when I talk to people about embezzlement, I always say there are two parts to it. There's the steal part, where in this case Deborah's property became Danielle Power's property, and then there's the concealment of how it's hidden afterwards. And you know, it's a lot easier to understand embezzlement when you kind of think of those two distinct components. And here's what Deborah and Scott said about concealment.
This case, what's interesting about it is the simplistic manner in which the embezzlement occurred. I mean, when it boiled down to it, it was a very simple method with one little switch that allowed her to conceal all of it. And it was, I don't want to say elegant, but it was elegant in its simplicity. It wasn't super convoluted. It was just simple but well concealed, you know. And I can't give away much in this forum about how to do that, of course. But I think that's the thing is no matter how much you think you are protected against embezzlement, a fraudster will figure out a way if you've got one in your office. And that's why every little thing matters. You know, if you find somebody in a dishonest act saying that they went, you know, they had to go to a funeral, but there was no funeral, but they had to leave for a day. That's a dishonest act. Even though it has nothing to do with embezzlement, it still shows dishonesty. And you really want to pay attention to all those little cues, because those are what's going to a lot of times reveal that there's something wrong in the finances of practice.
He's right. It was incredibly simple. And it was very disappointing to me in the end on how simple it was that we could have paid attention and known that something was going on all along. And it really just boils back down to the fact that when you don't know, when a dentist doesn't know how to do and what must be done in their front office to keep track of everything that's happening, is that it really sets up a bad opportunity for thieves to take over. So it's so critical. It's, you know, dental school is difficult. To get to where we are is difficult. And learning how to do the paperwork side of it is difficult, but there are wonderful people that would be happy to teach and learn.
You know, I think sometimes that people who don't have a whole lot of contact with embezzlement think that the embezzler's model is a little more simplistic than it is. What I always explain to people is embezzlement's a really interactive crime. So you have a thief who knows their doctor really well, knows their patterns, knows what they look at and what they don't, and then designs the stealing to bypass the doctor's scrutiny. And the analogy I use sometimes is it's kind of like you're playing poker with somebody, but your cards are face up and theirs are hidden. You know, who's likely to walk away with money from that table? Deborah, I expect you to agree if I said Danielle knew exactly what your systems of control were, and she just navigated around them.
I allowed Danielle to help me create them.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But just
so her cards were face down and mine were all face up.
But yeah, that's a very good point, and one maybe that we don't make enough. You know, not only do they know the control systems, in a lot of cases they are the control systems. In other words, you were counting on Danielle to protect your interest, and you know, she used that to advantage. And you know, it always amazes me the number of people who, you know, keep in touch years later. I mean, one of our regular co-hosts who I mentioned is not here tonight, Wendy Askins. Wendy has this legion of doctors she's worked for who, you know, all keep in touch with her, and you know, there are Christmas cards exchanged and all kinds of things. And This case was not all that different. And when it was going on, I remember Scott saying to me several times, I really like Dr. Staten, who I'm working with, and I just want to I want to make sure she gets the best outcome possible from this. But here are some of the comments about these two working with each other.
Scott's wonderful. He's ruthlessly honest, which I absolutely love and adore. He's super duper smart, and it was very entertaining and enlightening. I learned a lot through this whole process. I remember times where I would really be bent and really disturbed by this, and he would remind me on how fast things were going to turn around for me now that I could find someone to actually do their job correctly. Not only would I be making more money because she wasn't stealing it, but I would just be much better off in the long run because the energy would be on point. And he was so right. It wasn't just money that Danielle was stealing and the outcome of this. We discovered how much energy she was actually putting into stealing. And so it left her very little time to do her job completely and thoroughly. So there was multiple reasons why I wasn't more successful, because there was claims that weren't going out, or there was treatment plans that weren't being closed because she was really just targeting people that she could get to pay cash. So there was lots of opportunity for me to grow and be more successful. And I'm thankful for Scott for pointing that out to me, because I really honed in on that going forward. But going back to the working relationship with Scott, he enlightened me so much, taught me things about my system that I wasn't aware of, and really brought to light how important it is to be more connected and not trust someone full-heartedly just because I don't know the information.
Yeah, and a point Deborah makes that is so true is that stealing is work. I mean, it takes effort, it takes time, and thieves do one of two things. They either work a lot of extra hours, which is something we see as well, or they just neglect their day job because they're so busy stealing. And that means that the damage they can create goes well beyond the money they took. It also extends into kind of lost opportunity. And Deborah, I'm so happy to hear about doubling the size of your practice since she left. I mean, it points to the talent that you have and how much she was really holding you back.
Yeah, that's such an understatement. I got started so late in this career that it's sad to me that I wasted so many years before I was able to be brave enough and do what we're doing now. But it is what it is, and that's okay. I'm catching up. I've always been catching up. Being that I got started at 40, now I'm 50, and I'm gonna kick ass. It's okay.
Awesome. I am thrilled for you. So you heard how Deborah felt about working with Scott. Let's hear the other side of the story.
He's just such a personable individual. I talked to her, and I'm just comfortable, and that's part of what made me believe that as soon as we got rid of the thief, that she would be wildly successful. She's just so genuine and fun and funny. We had some great conversations that had nothing at all to do with dentistry or money or embezzlement. We just talked. I can't wait to go out to Vegas. I'm still planning to go there in July. We have a lunch marked on our calendars, which is going to be fun. I get to see your new office, but just a warm, very smart, very driven individual, and just a pleasure to work with. One of my favorite clients of all time.
Wow, that is nice. So we finish our investigation. Whenever we finish an investigation, the next thing that happens is that our report goes to people like the police and to Deborah's insurance company, because she she had a fairly modest amount of insurance coverage that she was able to cash in on. One thing I always tell people about embezzlement is that embezzlement in a dental practice is a really complicated crime. And the police detectives who are working on it really do not have the background, or for that matter, the available hours to dig into it the way it needs to happen. And one of our big jobs is to put together a report that spoon feeds them so that they can do their job. And that's what happened here. And I can tell you Scott's reports are exemplary in their clarity and their detail. And you can see exactly what happened next.
The Prosperident report itself was the key component to her actually paying the price in not only my case, but in the second case that was filed against her, that Prosperident also did a report on. Without the report, nothing would have happened because of the overwhelming evidence that Scott was able to create and produce. And it was beyond a reasonable doubt just within the report. It was just a matter of the DA taking all of that knowledge and caring enough to present it in a way that was enlightening to the jurors or the judge. It was Scott was phenomenal in laying out and really highlighting, like, even statistics. He showed statistics of the amount of cash that was going through my office versus what should be going through a normal dental office.
And there's just one thing I want to pick up in there. To misquote Britney Spears, whoops, she did it again.
Good one, David.
Yeah, Danielle got fired by Deborah, and the next thing we know, she's working across town. Well, what do you think she's doing when she's working across town? Stealing again, and Scott will have some comments on it in a minute. Deborah, do you want to tell us about the picture that's on the screen right now? Because there's a great story here.
That's another picture from me. Yeah, that's actually a patient's payment after Danielle no longer worked for me. This patient came in for their appointment, and they paid in straight up cash because they were trained to do that. They thought they had to do that because then we get their discount, and sure enough, we looked at the signed treatment plan, and that's how much money they owed. But we were just kind of shocked to see it happen in cash because Danielle had left, and so we just never really saw that happen too often.
Yeah, so you really weren't taking in very much cash at all when she was there.
No, I don't think Scott actually got to audit my bank account, but I'm sure the cash deposits were nothing like what Open Dental said they were.
Yeah, and imagine how much of those $100 bills ended up in your bank account now that Danielle was no longer there.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Well, I believe 100% of them happen now, but patients don't pay much in cash like that. Even though I'm in Vegas, that doesn't happen like that this often.
Yeah,
I think we're back to the national ratio or whatever it is. 4%, is that what it was, Scott? What was
about 4. I think that
4%.
certain demographics in certain cities are going to have a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower. But 4% is fairly typical if you were to average it.
And my average at the time was double.
Oh yeah, you got up to 11% of your money coming in was cash at one point. Of course, you didn't get to keep much of it, but yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and you both raise an interesting point because I get asked that question a lot, like, how much cash should I be taking in? And you heard Scott give the average, but there's a huge caveat to that, and it depends where your practice is and who your patients are. Mm-hmm. For example, if you're a gerodontist and you have a whole lot of senior patients, a lot of them are still paying cash because they've just never quite gotten on the bandwagon of paying electronically. If you're somewhere where there are a lot of immigrant farm workers, a lot of them will pay cash because they may not even have bank accounts, and typically they're paid in cash. So you know, that 4% is a is a very broad brush. And you know, I've seen practices that take in 10, 12, 14% in cash, and I've seen some that take in less than 1%. And it just depends on situational stuff. So Deborah told us a little bit on video about what it was like after Danielle left the practice, and there are some good gems here.
Over time after Danielle left, we had a certain breed of patients that would come prepared to pay cash for their appointments. Let you know, Scott, that when we were cleaning up and we found piles of paperwork in the cabinets and all that, we actually found some cash. I mean, it was like $300 or something, but obviously she had taken some money that she didn't even remember she took, and we found it.
Wow. So we mentioned that this was not Danielle's last rodeo. Scott ended up doing another investigation on her and found she was stealing again.
I'm really tired of investigating the same suspect more than once, frankly. Yeah, Deborah was keeping tabs on Danielle's whereabouts and discovered that she had gotten another job, and we were able to make contact with her new employer and did a short investigation, and she hadn't been there very long and she was already stealing. And so I did the same sort of report. It was a different method though, because you know, it's not that Danielle is stupid, right? She knows the dental business, and it's a shame that she used her powers for evil, because she would have been, had she not stolen, she would have been a good employee. Because she knows the ins and outs, and this other dentist used a different software, so she could not use the same technique that she used with Dr. Staten. And even if it was the same software, if he had different processes and protocols than Dr. Staten did, then she still would have morphed her. You know, she's a fraudster. They find a way to fraud. And so even though it was a different method, it was more of a smash and grab than a really concealed method like she was using with Deborah. But yeah, we got her in the second case as well.
And it didn't even end there. At that point, and sorry, just for the benefit of the audience, one thing that people don't always realize is how slowly the wheels of justice move. In other words, a lot of times when somebody catches an embezzler more or less red-handed in their practice, they kind of expect the police to come in, slap the handcuffs on the person and take them away. And that's not exactly how it works. You know, and among other things, COVID really jammed up the court system. You know, the justice system never moves fast, but during COVID, and you can just try to picture the logistics of having a jury trial. You know, in a courtroom, you typically have 25 to 30 people at a minimum, and having to space them all out 6 feet apart because of infection protocols. You know, it was very hard to do. So justice moves slowly, and it typically takes 2 to 3 years for somebody to get their feet held to the legal fire after they steal. And during that time, they are wandering around with the constitutional presumption of innocence. So in this case, it got a little too hot for Danielle in dentistry. So she left that and she went to Deborah. I'm thinking it was a furniture store, or
It was heating and air conditioning. HVAC.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she went into a totally different line of work, and of course, the next thing she did was steal. And I actually had a conversation with her next victim, who was kind of telling me about her antics. You know, it was as Scott said, the spots change on the leopard, but the hunger for raw meat doesn't really. So she was stealing in a different methodology in a different industry, but she was back to her old tricks. So everybody's interested in hearing what happened, but one of the most important things that they want to hear is what Deborah learned from this and what she's doing differently now. And we got some great comments from her on that.
Let's hear this.
So some advice for a new dentist starting out would be to learn how to do everything from the beginning while the business is beginning, or don't even become a practice owner until you know how the front office works. It's so very important to be able to analyze your numbers, to know why the adjustments are being made, to know why, to know what your collection rate is off of your treatment, and to understand where to keep the checks and balances so that you are earning what you're worth. The thing that I learned the most from this experience was to know that there's way more to being a great dentist than just drilling, filling, and billing. It's very important to continue to have a great culture within your office and trust people. One thing I guess I can say I learned to do was to not hold someone's mistakes against everybody else going forward. I still trust and I still allow and delegate, and I do not micromanage because nobody wants to work for someone that does that. But I learned how to analyze and look at things from behind at the 1,000-foot view, and to be able to see if anything isn't working properly.
Wow, there was a lot of wisdom packed into that minute and a half of video, Deborah.
Yeah, there was. Although I don't know that this gets mentioned later, David, but I have this overwhelming need to say it is, it's also very, very important to check a criminal's record. I know in the state of Nevada how to do that, but I don't know how it is across the country. But when you're hiring someone, it's so easy to just go on and check people's criminal records. And I learned here in the state of Nevada, it's not just the district court, but also there's the I just blanked out on that. There's district and then there's criminal. There's criminal and district. And so you have to check both records, because what I also learned through this process is she was originally charged in criminal, and then the case appears as dismissed. That's generally because she actually was convicted of that, and then it moves over to the district, or from criminal to district, and then district takes over the actual trial process. So there's two different systems to check in, but it's public record in the state of Nevada as well. I mean, anyways, I don't know about other states, but it was such a simple search to do. And I do it on every person I hire now. I always at least check their criminal record. If they have one, then I move on to district.
Yeah, that's so true. I will give the audience a really chilling statistic. 70 million Americans. So that equates to 1 in 4 adults has a criminal record. So if you don't check for that, it's exactly what Deborah said. You're playing Russian roulette, and sooner or later you're going to lose. The best way to check a criminal record is that there are companies that will do background checking for dentists. We've sent some people occasionally to one called besthire.com, but there are lots of other ones as well. You know, if you're stuck for a name, you can look up Best Hire. But the danger of checking criminal records in Nevada is that somebody may have a criminal record in California and then they move to Nevada, and if you only check Nevada, you will miss their California record. So to me, the best way to do that is to hire somebody, and they'll check all 50 states plus Puerto Rico and Guam and all the other places where a criminal record could hide. The other thing I'll mention too, Deborah, of course, is some people have federal criminal records, so there's a separate registry for that again. There are, and unfortunately, there's no website you can go to and find this stuff. It really the only reasonable way to do it is to hire somebody.
Do you know,
And-
that actually reminds me of something, David.
Yeah.
It was a Facebook post where someone said something about reviews of, it was around this, the whole time this thing happened, someone had said, I think I commented, I wish that we could review employees like employees can review employers, because we can get a bad rap in there. And someone said, we do, it's Prosperident. And when I saw that comment, that's how I found you. Because I didn't know about Prosperident. I didn't know that was a thing to find bad people.
Okay. Yeah, most of our audience probably knows this, but I'll mention it anyway. We keep part of our website called the Hall of Shame.
Yes,
And
as soon as I saw that, that's why I was like, oh my gosh, she's gonna be on that.
Yeah. And she is now. So yeah, it's called the Hall of Shame. We have, I think the last time I counted, about 740 embezzlers there. And there are a lot more that for various reasons we can't put on there. But as soon as somebody's stealing becomes public record, we get them up there pretty fast. And yeah, when you hire people, it's a really, really good idea to check the Hall of Shame as well. And one of the things I'll caution audience members on is a lot of embezzlers will change their name. You know, they'll, if they were using their married name before, they'll revert to their maiden name, or they'll do something to try to make it so that a casual search won't find them. And that's why we put up things like pictures and birth dates and as much stuff as we can to help you, help you if somebody's in that Hall of Shame to find them. And I get calls every couple of months from somebody who says, yeah, I was just kind of cruising around the internet last night and I stumbled on your Hall of Shame, and holy crap, my office manager is on there. And we get those calls with some regularity. Mm-hmm. And so thank you, Deborah. It's a good resource and one that people should know about. So then there's this picture, and this caused a lot of joy in our office, I can tell you. I think we have a video where there's a little bit of description on it, but I know Deborah's comments after the fact will be great too. Let's play the video first, though.
Yeah, she's in cuffs, and this photo was actually taken by Deborah, and she was there for she knew that Danielle had a meeting with her attorney, and so she was at the attorney's office, and she got arrested outside of that meeting, and snapped the picture and then texted it to me. Deborah and I text throughout this whole thing, and she texted that to me with a caption that was, I got justice.
Justice, absolute justice. Although in that particular photo, she did go to jail for the night, just for the night, which was really aggravating and frustrating. And because, no one feels the wrath and the pain the way that I do. Not just monetarily, but overall on the whole betrayal of everything that happened, and knowing that I had told her at one point that if she ever were to steal from me, that I would spend every last dime that it took to make sure that she paid the price. And but apparently that she didn't believe me.
To me though, there's no better justice on the planet than doing a takedown outside somebody's attorney's office. When Deborah, when you managed to make all this happen, I mean, it's not all that often that we cheer here at head office, but we were that day. Because that was just such a great way to do it. And yeah, she went to jail for the night, but her liberty was temporary, and it did catch up with her. But yeah, what a great way to do it. So that's that's one of my favorite takedown pictures of all time.
I also want to mention that I know that Dr. Staten seems like she was just gung-ho on prosecution and was going to go to the ends of the earth to put this person in jail. That wasn't always the case, if you recall, Deborah. When we first had our first conversation, you knew that something was untoward, and I asked you, how much do you think it was? And the number that you gave me was was very, very low in comparison to what we really found. And you were very forgiving. You were very compassionate. You understood her situation. And you know, we were talking about, you know, a $10,000 to $20,000 figure. And you were like, if that's it, then, you know, I'm just not interested in putting her in jail. And then when we found out the real number, that's when you threw on your cape and you became super detective. You really wanted to nail her at that point, which is understandable. But I just want the audience to know that Deborah was not just out for blood from the very start. She had compassion still for the suspect.
You know, Scott, you're so right. When I found out that like the equivalent that she stole was almost identical to the student loan debt that I had at the time, I was like, there's no way she's getting away with this. I'm so living up to my word of I will spend every last dime to put you in prison. And I'm proud to say that's where she sits today.
Yeah, you've done a lot for dentistry with that, and also for sharing your story with us tonight. So at this point, we're going to take some questions, and just a few reminders. Submit them through Zoom. If you enjoyed tonight, we would love you forever if you left us a 5-star review, and you can do it right there at prosperident.com/review us. Also, the registration is open for our next session. And again, it's Deborah Engelhardt Nash. You've got to hear this lady speak. What comes out of her mouth should almost inevitably be carved on a stone tablet somewhere. I've never met somebody who has the depth of understanding and the intellect that she does about dentistry. Deborah's a consultant. Her husband, Ross Nash, is a very well-known cosmetic dentist. And she's been the president of the Academy of Dental Management Consultants, I think either twice or 3 times. You know, she's a really esteemed woman. So if you want to get your name in early, you can use the link that's right on the screen to do that. Sheila, we haven't you've been busy with the chat and the questions, and we haven't had much chance to hear from you, but what are people dying to know about this situation?
Oh, well, actually, we have so many questions, and I want to thank everyone for putting up so many questions for us to answer tonight. So, one of the questions, let's see here, Dr. Staten, there's a question, you know, what do you do now? You know, kind of post all of this, you know, terrible experience, but what do you do now to protect yourself from embezzlement happening again?
Audit trails. Understand what your audit trails do, and that's your go-to on a daily basis. You can't just do it when you're inquisitive, because you have to know the routine of what happens through audit trails. And your systems, these dental software systems are built to show us everything that's happening all day long, although it can be very overwhelming because it does register everything that happens. So being able to distinguish between what's normal and what's abnormal, or find the pattern early on of things that are abnormal that are happening. So audit trail, audit trail, audit trail. I can't say enough about audit trailing.
Dave, can you mark this on the time on the recording? Because what she just said was put so succinctly, we need to put it into marketing, honestly, because looking at the audit trails to find theft after the fact, yeah, we all do that. That's what I'm here for. But what she just said about looking at the audit trail all the time, so you know what they look like when it's normal, that phrase is insane. That is absolutely what the crux of everything is. I thank you, Deborah, for that. I hadn't heard you say that before, and it marked that somewhere. That is key.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Duly noted. And one thing I'll mention as well, you know, and I'm just going to step back from what Deborah and Scott just said, because it's so good. But I'm gonna make a broader comment. Just like in dentistry, prevention is far cheaper and less painful than the cure. If I were a patient and I went to Deborah as my dentist and said, you know what, I want to spend the least amount of money in my lifetime on my teeth, what Deborah would say to me would be roughly, you should become really good friends with your toothbrush and your dental floss, and you should come in here every 6 months, because doing those things will cost you a whole lot less in your lifetime than what it will cost if you neglect those three basic things. So what you're hearing from Deborah and Scott is prevention. Something people don't necessarily know about Prosperident is we do a lot of proactive work as well. I mean, we do investigations like happened here. We also work with dentists to put the systems in place that will protect them. And I suspect that, in that context anyway, Deborah wishes that she met us 5 years earlier.
Heck yeah.
Heck yeah. All right.
All right.
And hiring you for prevention would have been much cheaper in the long run.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure would have.
And Dr. Staten, you're popular tonight. We have another question for you. Did any of the other employees in the office suspect anything?
That's a really great question. Yeah, so it still baffles me how Danielle had so much private time to talk to patients to get them captive in this. I was thinking about that when we talked about it earlier, and I was, I love doing dentistry, and so for me, it was always hard and difficult to charge patients as much as we do to do the things we do, and so she taught me early on to just leave the conversation and allow her to do her magic. And I did that, and my revenue went up. So I just trusted from there. But in hindsight, that was really a bad mistake that I see now. So being involved is very important. Although other people in my dental practice, because all of my past employees, or some of them that still work here, that worked here when she was here, it was just, she had great control, saying that that's the way Dr. Staten wants it done. That's the way Dr. Staten wants it done. And nobody ever questioned, because she was the office manager, saying that that's the way Dr. Staten wants it done. Although the thing is Dr. Staten didn't know it was being done. So knowing your systems, knowing your people, being in relationship, being involved, asking questions, and audit trail, audit trail, audit trail.
All right. Thank you for that. Let's see here. One of these is a little more technical. So how can you ensure that the cash and checks are reported on the daily cash collections reports? Scott.
Run your own reports in addition to the reports that you're given as the practice owner. There are multitudes of ways that thieves use to curate a report for you at the end of the day that they want you to see. And by you running your own report after the fact, and this question kind of came up in the chat also, by running your own report after that, the you received the one that you're given, you can compare those two to make sure that concealment hasn't occurred. These numbers need to match. And I often say, and I kind of typed it in chat, but I deleted it because I figured I'd get to it, is the owner, the dentist, does not need to do every job in the office themselves, but they need to know how to do every job in the office so that they can know if somebody's doing it wrong or if somebody's committing acts of theft or dishonesty. So, you're not going to make somebody angry if sorry, my cat. It's not going to make somebody angry if they think that you're double checking them, because they don't have to know that you're double checking them, or maybe you do want them to know. But that trust but verify is always there. You need to trust that the report that you were given from the front office is correct, but you need to be able to verify that at any time to make sure that they're not using a backdating scheme or some other type of scheme. When you run the report, it should be the same as theirs. That's really what the bottom line. And I think that covers a lot of the questions that came through in the chat. is, should there be 2 office managers? No, there doesn't need to be, because what if they collude and now they're both stealing from you? No, 1 office manager, but the doctor needs to know how to run their own reports to compare to the reports that they're given by their staff.
It's a good night here when we quote both Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan in the same session.
But
I
wait,
said
there was
just say no, and Scott said trust but verify. So
yeah, but Deborah also, if nobody caught it, she quoted Patrick Swayze from Dirty Dancing earlier too. So
Oh,
I don't know if anybody caught
did.
that, but it was awesome.
Nobody put baby in a corner. I did that.
okay.
all right.
Just one thing I'll mention, Sheila, before you go on to the next question.
Okay, sure.
And it was back to the earlier question about, did other staff know something was going on? We find 2 things in a lot of cases we look at. Another staff member knew something was amiss, but they didn't necessarily have the wherewithal to put it together into deciding it was embezzlement, but they knew something was wrong. One thing I really, really encourage people to do is to put in place a whistleblower policy. So this is a formal policy. It's normally part of your employee handbook, and it's where you explain what will happen if somebody comes forward. Because I think what happens in a lot of practices is you have somebody who, again, knows something is a little stinky, but doesn't realize it's embezzlement and doesn't want to go to the doctor with kind of a half-baked explanation or theory about what's going on. So the whistleblower policy is just a way of giving that person some reassurance that, if they come forward, you'll protect their identity, you'll investigate it properly, and you'll do what has to be done. Sheila, maybe we can put that whistleblower policy. We'll send people out. It might be tomorrow or next week, but we'll send out a link to our template for your policy, and it's a really good thing to have.
Great. Thank you for that. So that'll be a great thing for the registrants to receive. So I'll take care of that. All right. I have a quick question. Again, it's about the team members for you, Dr. Staten. Were they relieved when she left your practice, or was it, gone in a whisper? How did that go down?
No, to this date, okay, so I had a person working with me, my hygienist, and I met on my first day as a paid dentist. We're still working together. We're 11 years in now together. And she's actually the one who broke the news of Danielle doing this when I was on vacation. And she's still with me today. And there was so much relief. She had suspected a couple of times things to me. And I just told her, hold on, Marlene, I'm really trying to make sure that this is what's happening so that we have proper evidence, because if that's what's happening, she's going to pay the price. And Marlene stuck with me and was confident in exposing all of that to me. And then, so was there relief? Yes. Actually, I have my front office girl now that, she's my revenue cycle manager is what I call her. She does all of my billing. She was a receptionist at the time when Danielle was here working with us. She left the practice for other reasons. She moved out of state. And when she came back to Las Vegas, she reapplied and works for me now. And in hindsight, we always have those hindsight moments of the way things were before when Danielle was here versus the way things are now. So my team is so relieved. We giggle about it from time to time. And we make fun of it, although my team also admires how open my culture is and how much we talk and how open and honest we are together. And they know that there's nothing that is secret around my practice. It's all an open book. And they appreciate that about the culture. And they know that I am only trying to do what's ethical and right by the patients, by them, by my team, and by myself. Life's too short to not live it the right way, I think.
Yes. Oh, that's a great response. And David, this one might be for you. there's a question on artificial intelligence and, how do you see this sort of impacting embezzlement, fraud, kind of gaps and vulnerabilities going forward?
Wow, great question. And that's a hot topic right now in dentistry. And I guess I'll say a couple of things. First of all, I wish there was more natural intelligence in the world and that we didn't necessarily need to resort to the artificial stuff, but that's just a slightly cynical observation. As far as AI goes, I can tell you that some of the DSOs are very actively looking at replacing some front desk functions with AI. And I was at a DSO conference a little while ago, and the head of one decent sized DSO said, you know what, most of what a front desk does can be programmed as a kind of if then else sort of thing. So, in terms of things like booking appointments and, looking for payments from people and things like that, the ability is there to automate all those things. What ultimate impact it's going to have on embezzlement is hard to say at this point. I mean, I think there will always be a human side to dental care, and there will always be humans involved. And when practice management software first came out, I think a lot of people thought, well, this will be the end of embezzlement in dentistry, and in fact, it was only the beginning. There's been way more money stolen since practice is computerized than when they were using the old manual pegboard system. And every technological innovation opens up pathways for embezzlement. Every time there's a new feature, it creates more potential for embezzlement. So that's a long way of saying I don't know, but I think stealing's still going to happen.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. It's a very big topic. You're right. We hear about it all the time.
Yeah.
So I think we can do two questions at once, and I think we're almost out of time. So I really want to thank all the people who've given us so many questions tonight. It just shows you how engaged people are in your story, Dr. Staten. So was there more than one methodology employed by Daniel Powers? And what controls do we need to put in place to make sure that thieves don't embezzle money in your practice?
Audit trail, audit trail, audit trail.
And it's good that you said that, because audit trail is important. But we really, controls to prevent is sort of asking yourself to go to sleep at the wheel because you've prevented embezzlement. We really talk about detection of anomaly over the word prevention. And I know everybody wants to prevent embezzlement, but it is really more about having controls to detect. And so that's sort of the verbiage that we use. And the other question was, how many methodologies did she have? Christine, I see you. That question came from Christine Geary, who just got promoted to supervising examiner, which was incredibly well deserved. There's super categories of theft, and then there's all sorts of subcategories. This one really did use one super category with a bunch of variations on it. We can go over those if you want, Christine. I'll screen share with you. But yeah, I mean, it really was basically one mode. There were a lot of different iterations within that primary mode, if that helps answer the question.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it back to David. And once again, thank you everyone for so many questions and great engagement tonight. Absolutely.
I'd like to echo Sheila's thank you to the audience. You guys are always great, and we love having you with us. A couple of thank yous tonight. First of all, I'd like to thank my co-host Sheila O'Driscoll for stepping on camera tonight in a break with tradition. Sheila, you did great, and we probably love to have you back to do this again. Scott Clifford, the Bloodhound. He is, his contribution to Prosperident and to the dental profession is just immense, and he's really an anchor here. We are so privileged to have him. The other thing you may not know is Scott's wife, Rose Clifford, is also an investigator with us, and has been for a long time. So the Clifford family, I think of as the first family of dental embezzlement investigation, and their daughter Mickey is probably going to be joining us sooner or later as well. And they're just a terrific group of people. And my final thank you, and it's a huge one, is for Deborah Staten for coming on and bearing her soul and telling everybody what happened to her. And she has really turned this into a teaching moment, not just for herself, but for the whole profession. And I just can't thank you enough, Deborah, for doing that.
I mean, David, if I can help anyone, that's the big thing about this is there is so much prevention that could happen, and it didn't have to be this way. And if people knew how to protect themselves or what to do different, I believe it would save a lot of people. So I am a huge advocate for this, and going forward, if anybody wants to talk to me about something, I'd be happy to.
That's wonderful. And with our guests, we normally ask them if there's a particular charity that they support. And Deborah mentioned Casa Nevada, and we've made a donation to them on her behalf. So thank you very much for doing that. And at that point, I'd like to wish you all a good night. You'll get to hear the guy that internally we call Mr. Big Voice in a second. And thank you all very much, and we really look forward to seeing you on June the 22nd. Good night, everybody.
This concludes this episode of the Prosperident webinar series. The team will be back soon with more tools and ideas. If you have questions about this webinar, if you would like to discuss your practice with one of us, or if there is a topic you would like to see in a future webinar, we would love to hear from you. You can contact Prosperident through its website, www.prosperident.com, or by calling 888-398-2327.